Good afternoon, everyone. It being the hour of 2 o'clock, I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. And also, I think I should make note that it's a very important day, significant day. September 8th, 2020 is nomination day across the province for the municipal elections that are upcoming. So best of luck to all of those who have put their names in for serving on town council in the upcoming term. Also, first day of school for all of the folks, which is a little different this year, of course, but we wish everyone hope it all went well and that they have an uneventful first term of school. And I do need to acknowledge as well that in the town of Lunenburg, we are situated on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. First order of business is to look for a motion to approve our agenda, and also noting, as always, or as has been our practice of late, the priority items which are bolded. Could I have a motion to approve? Moved by Councillor Mosher, seconded by the Deputy Mayor for the approval of the agenda. All in favor? And there's no one left to oppose, so the motion is carried. Moving next then to our council meeting minutes of August 25th. So I'd look for a motion to approve those meeting minutes, please. Moved by Councillor Croft, seconded by Councillor Bachman. Thank you. Any notations, errors, or omissions? I hear none, so all in favor of approval? And that is unanimous, so the motion is carried and those meeting minutes are approved and now serve as our official record. There are no public hearings, presentations, or questions for this afternoon. So we can move right into correspondence, and I will go through that with as it's the next on the agenda, and although they're not bolded, most of them are carried over from our previous meeting. So I think we should hopefully move through them fairly quickly, but want to make sure we note what is included. So 6A, the Lunenburg Waterfront Symposium 2020 report. So that was a very thorough report circulated within the community and also part of our agenda package here. So hopefully everyone has had time to review it. It's very comprehensive and informative on what's happening on our waterfront. And they note an upcoming symposium, which I think is now set for I was going to write that down. I believe it's the 17th of September. So please keep your eyes open for that. It also will be certainly worthwhile to listen in on and know what's happening on our waterfront with the work of waterfront our waterfront association locally and Develop Nova Scotia, of course, in partnership. Also on the list of correspondence is the 2019-2020 annual report for Property Valuation Services Corporation. So that again is an annual report we receive, and certainly very significant impact on the work that we do as council as they set the assessments of the properties throughout the province. Item C is the notice of provincial tourist accommodation registry by the Department of Business. This is certainly something we've talked about before. The registration has been up and running now since April 1. It has had some lack of uptake early on. I'm not sure what its status is now, but certainly the official notification of what it is and how it works and what it is not, from my personal perspective, is also there in black and white for our review. And also there's contact information there, which is very important for more information. The there isn't any, and please stop me, other members of council. I'm rambling through here, but if please speak out or wave madly to get my attention if you have further comment or questions on any of these items as I go through. This is just a very nice letter to receive from the VON, a thank you letter for the grant monies that they were given as a matter of our budget discussions. So we wish them well with their very important work. Item E, provincial beautification funding, partial approval. So we're very grateful for the participation of the province and the funding they provided for the beautification work that we are doing in the community. Do note that it is partial though, so we may not get all of that work done as we had intended if we had received the full complement we had requested. But grateful nonetheless for the partnership and making our community the best it can be. A letter from the Ministry of Nova Scotia Fisheries regarding marine debris cleanup program. And I thought this was a very interesting letter to receive. It outlines a program that the province has been put in place to encourage marine cleanup. It does ask for the assistance of municipalities in as this program unfolds. And I wasn't completely clear on what was being asked of us. And I'm with, I'd welcome the input from other members of council on this, but I think it may bear some or be worthy of some further inquiry by our staff on our behalf with respect to what the expectation may be. It seems to be that there may be some demand or some expectation that there'll be fees forgiven by municipalities for debris that's collected if there are volunteer groups that offer to do this. And I guess I just don't want us to be caught unaware and to not be prepared on one hand, and to be prepared because if there's a cost that we then have to bear, then I would hope that council would be and staff would be fully aware of what that might be. So are there thoughts on that from other members of council? Could weigh in. Yes, oh yes, Councillor Bachman, thanks.
I just agree with what you're saying. It would be nice to know what we are on the hook for. So if we could request staff to reach out and just find out what our expectations were, I think would be a good idea.
Thank you. Councillor Risser, could that be a second and 2 fingers instead of 1 for seconding that as a motion, just so we do it as formally, but just make sure it gets back as we would wish. For motion. I mean, I don't think it's a great deal of work involved, just some clarification probably as much as anything, but.
Your worship, we did reach out to Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation to inquire if they were going to make an application. And they said they're just exploring the opportunity. And I said that we would be, interested in helping them in whatever way. So we've made some initial contact there with
Great.
that organization.
Thank you. So I think the further inquiry too would be to Department of Fisheries to see what they're kind of holding us up to do, and perhaps raising the expectation of the volunteer sector. So if we can have that as a motion, yes, Councillor Croft.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just wondering how much shoreline or we can really have access to, because if you look along the main waterfront and the wharfs and all the stuff that's along there, I mean, we can't access any of that shoreline. So just wondering how this program or this funding program, I guess, will work. And maybe more information is required.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little vague. I mean, the application, I think they're expecting volunteers to, or that was my interpretation, that volunteers would go, or a volunteer group would go about the shoreline, maybe from the water, and collect debris and bring it in, and then I think they're looking for partnership from municipalities at the disposal end, but that's not clear to me. So any further discussion? I'll call for the question then, if it's clear, Ms. Renton, what we're asking, just as for a staff report to clarify. So all in favor? Great, and so it's a unanimous vote, all in favor, so that motion is carried. Thanks very much. The next item of correspondence is another thank you note from the Lunenburg and District Swimming Pool for the financial support we granted them in our budget, and lovely note updating us on their very successful summer, which was to which we owe them a debt of gratitude. Volunteer run organization who did very well in offering a valuable recreational opportunity for the community for the summer season. So congratulations back to them in response to their letter of thanks. Society of St. Vincent de Paul, likewise, a letter of thanks for the grant they were given. 6I, Blue Nose Coastal Action Foundation Board Membership and Bylaw Update Letter, and that's alerting us to the change in bylaws that they've undertaken. Deputy Mayor McGee had represented us on that board as of late, and they are looking to change things up. And I don't know if there's any discussion warranted here. It may come up when we're looking at our committee policy again, where we had recognized that in that appointment in the past. But if there isn't any discussion now, we can just move on. But did you want to speak to the Deputy Mayor at all?
Not really, Your Worship. Maybe when we come up later on, I'll say a couple of things. Thanks.
Okay, very well. So we will move then on to if it's works for the rest of council, I'll then kind of prioritize then for our bolded items, which I think is actually kind of next up anyway, is the first bolded item, which is rising from the minutes, item 7A1, which is the municipal and CSAP elections 2020 proposed resolution to appoint an additional assistant returning officer. And Mr. Burke as our returning officer and solicitor, although I think this is as his, I'm not sure which hat he was wearing with this, but it is something that we need to do simply to have the right people in place to conduct the election in the new format. So if someone would be willing to move that resolution. Yes, Deputy Mayor. So moving and seconded by Councillor Visser. Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? I think Ms. Renton would probably be able to answer them if there are any. I don't see any indication of that, so I will call for the question. All in favor? And there's no one to oppose. The motion is carried. And we thank Ms. McMillan for serving in that extra capacity. So I'll then jump then to the next prioritized item that is bolded. So we try to ensure we tend to the business that is most pressing in our limited time frame in this format. So I will turn our attention to 8A, committee meeting minutes, recommendations, reports, and notices of motion. And we'll look at the notices of motion actually that are coming out of our general government meeting of July 16th. And look for the deputy mayor to speak to those. You would, please.
Your worship, I'm speaking to 2, 3, and 4. I think Councillor Mosier is speaking to number 1.
Thank you.
Before I would give that notice of motion, this was prepared several meetings ago, and we have an August 25th date. So I think we need to clarify that date before I give notice of motion, and I'll be happy to do that. But what would be the next council meeting that we would have this?
September 22nd, your worship, and that will be the same for most of these recommendations because they've been deferred for 2 meetings, I think. So September 22.
Okay, so based on that, I would like to give notice of motion of the proposed revised bylaw number 38, solid waste management bylaw as in Schedule A for first reading at the September 22nd, 2020 council meeting.
Thank you very much for doing that. And notices of motion just require one member of council to put forward. So thank you. There is opportunity or further opportunity for discussion on all of these at that meeting for first reading.
Your worship, for item number 2, I would give notice of motion on the proposed adoption of a new council policy dealing with committees of council, also to be dealt with at the September 22nd meeting.
Thank you.
And item number 3 is a notice of motion to repeal the bylaw number 5, which dealt with, councils or committees of council before, and included things like Miss Lunenburg contest and so on. So we'll, and I'm sorry, that's a number 4. So no, and just a notice of motion on the repeal of that bylaw dealing with councils or committees of council. And lastly, number 4, the adoption of a revised policy number 18 on town-sponsored events, again to more just to update it and take out some of the references to things like Miss Lunenburg pageant and so on. So another notice of motion for the 22nd.
Thank you very much. So just checking with Ms. Renton, so that those things are then duly put forward for, and that's basically our.
Yep,
our
that's
means of-
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Public notification that these things are being updated, and that has been the work of the General Government Committee to review our policies and procedures and update as necessary and appropriate. So hopefully we'll get those things looked after in a matter of course. So again, just moving to the next bolded item, I would turn everyone's attention to 9A. And we have a sequence of these financial reports. And perhaps I know that I saw, yes, there she is. I knew Ms. Dagley was with us. And as finance director, perhaps you would just review the first one for us with respect to the water utility and what we're looking at with this report.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, before council today, there are 3 reports regarding the year end of March 31st, 2020. The first, as Your Worship has noted, is for the water utility. So there were some increased sales and some unanticipated savings in the utility during the past year, which has led to the ability to have an additional reserve transfer. Originally was budgeted for $17,700. There are additional funds of $89,300 for a total of $107 to be transferred to future capital reserves in the water utility. The water utility, if you review the 10-year capital budget, does have some significant projects coming up for in the next 10 years, totaling almost $4 million. After this reserve transfer, there will be a small surplus of $856 for the year. And there is attached to the report a summary of the capital projects that were undertaken, and all of the funding is as noted in the budget from the depreciation reserves. Happy to answer any questions if there are any, or there is a draft motion for the additional reserve transfer.
Thanks for that, Ms. Dagley. Are there questions? Yes, sorry, Councillor Risser, go ahead.
I was just going to move the draft motion.
Okay, so moved. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Mosier. Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, I did see your hand raised belatedly. So did you have a question?
Well, yes, thanks, Your Worship. To Lisa, to do with actually this and the next item as well. Like, we took a lot of things out of the budget to compensate for the loss of revenue due to COVID and so on. Was there anything in there that would be good for us to put back at this point, using some of this, take a dividend out and restore some of the things that we cut?
Well, there's already a dividend declared to the town in the water utility. So that has carried out, and that dividend is in place for 2021 as well. At this time, I don't see that it is that this is something that we could transfer to the town, this extra funds, that it should be for the utilities capital purchases for the future.
That satisfies your curiosity?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other questions of Ms. Dagley? We do have the motion of the recommended motion on the floor. So I will ask then for the question. All in favor? And, that was unanimous. The motion is carried, and so moved. So we can then move to the next report, which is of the electric utility.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the electric utility had originally been budgeting for a deficit in fiscal 19-20. Pleased to report that that is not the case, and that if we move forward with the proposed reserve transfer, that there would still be a small surplus at the end of the year. The electric utility, like the water utility, has lots of capital projects that can be covered with this additional funding. There is also a report there, all their capital projects, and all the ones that have been completed will be funded from the depreciation reserve, as had been noted in the budget. There are a number of projects, unfortunately, with the Hurricane Dorian and capacity for our service provider to get all of the repairs that were necessary from that completed didn't all get done. Some are being worked on now, and some are being worked on throughout the fall, but they will all be completed by the end of this fiscal year. So there is some draft motion for that as well, Your Worship.
Yeah, there is. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I'll move the draft recommendation, draft motion, and but I do have a question as well. I'll wait for a seconder and then I'll pose my question.
Okay, I saw Councillor Croft, the seconder.
Through to Lisa, where is the windfall where we budgeted for a loss, and where would the windfall come from with these added money?
The majority of it, Councillor Mosier, was just in increased sales. And as you know, electricity sales are really weather dependent, and that's where the majority of it came from.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions with regard to the motion we have on the floor or the report? The motion is that we, for the fiscal year ended March 31st, that the electric utilities transfer $44,000 to its future capital reserve. So all in favor? And again, no one to oppose, so the motion is carried. Thank you. One more from Ms. Dagley.
Certainly, Your Worship. So the final one is for the town's general operating fund. There are a number of items here with this fund. So originally there was budgeted capital from revenue of $65,800. When the year end was completed, there was just over another $37,000 that could be applied to reduce our borrowing needs. There is a need for borrowing this fiscal year of $154,000, which is significantly lower than what we had budgeted. However, some of those items that had been budgeted to borrow have been carried forward to 2021. Namely, the two major ones are the new dump truck for Public Works and the finalization of the restoration at the Lunenburg Academy. If council proceeds with the funding as outlined in Schedule 1, which includes every capital project with the budgeted funding and the actual funding, the town will have a modest surplus for the year of $361. And included in the draft motions are the approval of the capital funding and a temporary borrowing resolution that's required by the province and Municipal Finance Corporation in order to fund those capital items.
Thank you, Ms. Dagley. So we have two separate motions that we're looking for someone to put on the floor. Moved by Councillor Bachmann, the first one, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. And oops, I just lost it. That is that the capital financing for fiscal 1920 is approved as outlined in the schedule that's attached. Are questions on that motion? Don't hear any, so all in favor? And there's no one to oppose. The motion is carried. And there is a second recommended motion from this report. Yes, Councillor Croft. You moving?
I'll move that motion.
Moving, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Bachmann. Thank you very much. And that is that a temporary borrowing resolution is approved at the amount of $154,000 as outlined in Schedule 2. Questions on that motion? Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Lisa. Lisa, I'm just wondering the two items that are deferred from this year, what level of risk is there in deferring them? I mean, if the truck the Public Works uses breaks down or anything related to the academy, just ask you to speak to that.
Sure. They're not, they were deferred at March 31st, 2020, just because of delivery. The truck has actually arrived in June. It's just that this borrowing is related to previous fiscal year. So
Okay.
a bit of a timing thing. And the same with the academy, it's not deferred. It's just that the borrowing is deferred. So it's really just waiting an extra year before we have to borrow the funds to pay for those capital assets.
Gotcha. I'm good.
Thanks. If there aren't any further questions, all in favor of the motion? Motion is unanimously approved. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Ms. Dagley, for those reports. And we should be all set then. We do have an audit committee meeting next week.
Yes, on the 17th, Your Worship.
On the 17th. So we look forward to that for thorough review of those financial records. Moving then to the next item on the agenda, which is also bolded, which is the September and October 2020 council meeting schedule, an opportunity for discussion on that. And yeah, so there it is shown for us. So as it stands, our regular schedule would have council and committee meetings through September 2020 and October 2020 as noted. Meetings today, and then the 15th, we always allow an opportunity for in-camera items of council to be allotted, and then the 4th Tuesday is typically a council day, and likewise for the month of October. It does carry us over the election period, of course. Just a reminder that the sitting council has authority until a new council is sworn in, and that's just so nothing goes adrift in the transition period. Just we still seem to have a fairly full agenda. Not sure if that will get whittled down somewhat as this fall unfolds, but and I'm not sure if our staff wanted to weigh in on this discussion as to requirements that are important to make sure we stay on top of. And I'm not sure if there were any committees that needed, that timing needed discussion. So yes, go ahead. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Just curious, Your Worship, if we heard any word on council's meeting in person yet, or is it just status quo for now?
I spoke, Ms. Renton and I spoke about that briefly. I know the option has been provided. So the ban on in-person meetings was lifted by Municipal Affairs with the proviso that the meeting could be conducted under strict public health restrictions, which do make it quite challenging to meet in person and still abide by all the regulations, social distanced, masked, so on and so forth. So I guess that's up for discussion, and Ms. Renton may, I know she has looked into, looked at the possibility and what that might involve to a certain degree. So don't know if you'd like to comment, Bea?
Okay, sure, certainly, Your Worship. So we have, Your Worship, looked at that. Council has just very briefly discussed this item before, as you'll recall, with no definitive direction to staff or decision being made. The council chamber can certainly accommodate the 6-foot distancing. I guess there become a couple of other questions of there would be a number of support staff that would typically be in place, which would significantly reduce the number of members of public that could be in attendance, perhaps down to 5 people. You need someone at the door to have people sort of keep count as people come in and out of the building to maintain distancing, and to escort people to other parts of the building if needed. Then you need staff, as I say, inside to do videotaping, because if you were going to have still live feed, because if you wanted members of the public, let's say it was an issue that there were going to be a number of presentations, maybe a bylaw submission, or some matter of controversy where you were going to have a lot of public interest, you'd probably still want to have some sort of public feed, because you would be limited in the number of people that could come into the council chamber from outside the numbers of council and immediate staff needed. So you'd have a videographer and then someone to just run the Zoom component of the meeting, minute takers, that sort of thing. So that being said, it might be something that council wants to try dress rehearsal of, because acoustics are a really big issue. As you know, all along we've had a challenge in that room. It's designed as a courtroom, not designed as a council chamber. So all projection is forward facing to the judge on the dais. And without that setup, it does present some auditory challenges, particularly if people kept masks on, if that determination was made by council, or people just by choice wanted to do that for whatever personal health reason. So it might be something you want to try if you're interested in pursuing that. Of course, we've had tremendous support and feedback on the Zoom meetings and very good participation. We're not hearing from the public that they are concerned and would like us to meet in person, but that's not to say that there's not that sentiment out there. Maybe it's just not being expressed for whatever reason, and we haven't actively solicited input. But I would strongly encourage you to just try and see if the council chamber worked first before you had an actual meeting, that the logistics of which might get bogged down if hearing was a challenge. Then, of course, we have other options such as the auditorium, the community center auditorium, much larger space, better air circulation we would have there, and the new fire hall that you could also meet at, where we've had meetings traditionally in the past. Again, air circulation is particularly important if people are going to be taking masks off. We don't have enough HEPA filter machines that would be large enough to accommodate and clean the air in such a space. So we'd be pleased to help put on some demonstrations, Your Worship, of any and all of those facilities, so you could pilot and see how functional that was for you, if that might be of interest.
Councillor Mosier.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I do think it is important to come back together meeting. I think we need to get the kinks worked out. We're going to have a new council in a couple of months here, and I think the camaraderie to build, you can do it in person. You can't do it over the Zoom technique. It shouldn't be of any consequence to the public. We can still Zoom our content out to the general public, so it's no it's no inconvenience other than if you want to do a presentation, but you could still do your presentations through Zoom. So that shouldn't create too bad of problems for us. And in the meantime, I mean, we certainly can practice with our in-camera meeting to see what the acoustics might be like in the council chambers. And then if that's not adequate, then we can move on to some of the other suggestions that Ms. Renton had for alternative meeting places.
Councillor Risser noted agreement with some of those comments. Is there any other sentiments, any other comments to be made? What would council like to see? We will need to give some direction. Yes, Councillor Croft.
I agree with Councillor Mosier. I think we should do a trial run, and that would be perfect at our in-camera meeting. If we could try that and see how it works, I'd be all in favor of that. Thank you.
So we are scheduled to have a council meeting to deal with in-camera items in a week's time.
Yeah, Your Worship, if there's any consideration to, we'll try our best to meet that challenge, Your Worship. It is Tuesday. Tomorrow is taken up with getting the minutes out, and then I just have to work out with staff the logistics of spacing, and videotaping. We'll try our best to meet that challenge, Your Worship, but it is a short week.
Short weekend and staff vacations are maybe at play as well. I just know that Ms. McCallum is technically on vacation this week, although she is with us for this meeting. And she generally would be very integral to making these arrangements. Yes.
I have a couple of appointments, Your Worship. I cannot cancel this week. One of them is a funeral. So getting out the agenda. Anyway, we'll try our best. If nothing else, you could have a trial run perhaps later next week if that didn't work. But we have to do it safely, and we have to do it practically that you can still have a functioning meeting. So I'll do my utmost to make sure that happens. But please understand if there's a delay for some reason. I'll do my utmost to make sure it does.
So we're still under discussion with this. I think Councillor Croft and Councillor Risser, did you indicate you wanted to speak further?
Yeah, I think Ms. Renton mentioned about videotaping, but in camera, I guess we don't have to videotape that. I wouldn't think so. I think that could be a perfect place to try things out.
We are still conducting meetings via Zoom, and I have to be as well mention that there may be staff who are not comfortable coming into the council chamber. If they don't know what the health protocol is, we have to do a risk hazard assessment through our safety policy. So I'm not trying to put up roadblocks by any means, but I do have to contact them. There may still be people that want to participate in the meeting, and I haven't prepared the agenda yet. And if they do not feel comfortable coming to the meeting physically in person, they do legally have the right to participate via Zoom. So we have to make sure that option is still available. That's why I mentioned that.
So yeah, so not the broadcast, but still the video, which is, we would have to figure out anyway for a regular meeting of council. So that's something to consider. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, the Zoom would be set up regardless, because we'd either be meeting through Zoom or we'd be, so the Zoom setup is already there. So if someone's not comfortable coming to the meeting, they can participate through Zoom because it's, I would say it's already there. Because if we didn't meet in person, we'd be meeting through Zoom, would we not?
But you have to operate in both platforms in person and then have somebody videotaping it for those who may not be able to attend in person. So you wouldn't have your home computer or your work computer on your desk in the council chamber, I assume, unless you bring your laptop in and your iPad for your written materials. Does that make sense? Or someone would have to be videotaping you in the council chamber such that the staff member could see you, or at least have the audio to be able to answer a question of council, make a presentation, and join you accordingly. And then find a way to project the Zoom. So just to say, the pandemic creates issues, and we try our best. Every week as staff, we try and resolve new Zoom issues and new pandemic. This is a Minister of Municipal Affairs order. This is not something that we dreamed up ourselves. So we just have to be thoughtful about it. And if someone, I mean, I guess you could have it just by conference call. You could eliminate the Zoom and hopefully you could hear the staff member. We've certainly done conference call participation before and not have any Zoom component. That might make it easier if that was okay.
Well, just so you know, I do all the meetings through my iPad, and there's my agenda, and any written material, I just print it off, and I only use it with one device, and I'm, seeing the function okay.
So if that's fine for everyone and you don't need to, if you use your Zoom, your iPad for Zoom, then that would make it easier. But that is where your documents are found. If you can switch back and forth, I don't know. But.
Yeah. So
I mean, if there's some council members that would like to help with this, with working out the logistics, that would be of great assistance to your worship, if there was any interest in doing that, if people have thought through this. So I just think you want to do it well. It's an important meeting, and we will try our best, your worship. I will do my darndest to make sure this happens for you next Tuesday.
Well, that was the suggestion, Ms. Renton. I remind you that wasn't a council directive. That was the discussion topic, but we haven't made a motion to that effect. We were having a discussion on it. Perhaps somebody would like to make a motion. This is, we sometimes fall into that, that practice. So, I mean, I think this discussion is important. That it's not as simple as it appears at first blush. As there are multiple platforms, and I had the similar discussion with Ms. Renton earlier today about, well, we could just Zoom as we always do, and then it occurred to me during the course of that discussion that I use 2 different devices to function, and so that would present challenges for me. I don't use the same device to project Zoom as I do to access my material. So I'm sure it's not an insurmountable problem, but if there are others who also function that way, then it does create glitches we have to figure out in the process of arranging to meet in person. So yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I will move then that we meet in person for our next in-camera meeting. We can have the agenda package printed off to us if that's a problem with material, and then we can Zoom with our iPads, because we always have them with us regardless at our council meetings.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Visser.
I'm
Further
just going to
discussion?
have to, yeah, sorry, if I could just capture it first, Your Worship, so that we meet in person for our next in-camera meeting. There were privacy reasons why council just had things on iPad, but now you want to print off agenda packages and have them delivered to council.
I think the printing off was just a suggestion as a possible way that it could happen. I don't think, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Mosier, but I don't think that was necessarily the directive. But if that what was necessary to make it work, then that was a suggested way to work around the need for two different devices.
And there was a third item, Your Worship, which I didn't catch, which Councillor Mosier had indicated.
To meet in person and was for
We would Zoom through our iPads.
Thank you.
so
I have that now, Your Worship. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, thanks. So it is moved and seconded. Is there any further questions or discussion for this? I do think it's it would be nice to meet again in person. I don't know the timing. I don't think is necessarily fair to staff at this point, but if that's what we want to strive for, then it could be. I would be in favor, I guess, of putting a proviso or a qualification on that, depending on what was determined, given the time frame. Yeah, and the technicalities exactly just need to be worked out. So I don't think we're in a position to be giving direction in that regard at this point. So, any further comments? Yes, Councillor Bachman.
I'm a two-person user. I use my PC do the Zoom thing, and then use my my iPad for the information purposes. So I'd be one of the people that would require a printed version. So I don't know if everybody needs a print version, but myself, I would like one, please.
So and I guess as I tried to say, printed was a suggested. You know, if there's someone videotaping, and that seems to be the best way to do it from staff perspective, once they have time to sort of figure out the logistics, then we may not need to have printed material. So I'm just guess I'm wondering about the wisdom of giving direction on the mechanics of how it happens is part of the motion, and whether that's something we need to.
I think for privacy reasons, Your Worship, we had protocols for having in-camera documents on a secured device. So I would feel more comfortable as a clerk if it did say that they were going to be printed off. They would be, I think, delivered probably more reasonably on or available for pickup Monday morning. As I say, I have a funeral to go to on Friday afternoon. So it does present some time challenges for me, but and I also have another appointment on Thursday, but I can definitely have the packages ready either late Friday after I've left the office, or on Monday morning for pickup here. Or if you want them delivered to your home, that's, you know, if you do want them delivered, then that we just need a little more time to do that. So that is helpful to include that.
So can you please then read for me what you have as a motion?
So moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Risser, that we meet in person for our next in-camera meeting comma, print off agenda packages and have them delivered to council and Zoom through our iPads.
Yes, Councillor Bachman.
I can do all my pre-work on my iPad. I would only need the printed version while in the council chambers. So as long as it was on my desk when I arrived, that's the only time I would need a printed version. Other than that, I could do everything with my iPad, you know, except for in at the meeting while we were in camera, I would need the paper in order to be able to review the paper and Zoom through the iPad. So I wouldn't need a printed copy until I actually showed up that evening.
Councillor Mosier.
Well, ditto to Councillor Bachman, exactly. I mean, the materials in front of us like always. It's being delivered through our iPad like always. The only time we'll need a copy or an alternative is when we're sitting there at our desks. So it's, and I think in terms of security, I mean, the papers can be collected after we're done, so it's not an issue. It's just as easy for me to share information on my iPad as it is a piece of paper or hard copy. So I don't see where that's relevant either.
So I just looked at the agenda now, Your Worship, the draft agenda, and it doesn't look too bad for Tuesday. It's actually quite a light agenda thus far, but I'll say that and it'll get quite heavy, no doubt. So, but so far it should be quite doable. There's just things that we need to work out, and you know, it's fairly short notice, to be candid, but we will make it done if this motion is approved by council.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I'll just maybe echo some of the concerns about timing. You know, I think it might be kind of fun to figure out how to do this. And at the risk of, I don't know if I can volunteer this for Tuesday, but certainly for within the next couple of weeks, that, you know, I've got the audiovisual technology to broadcast it like with professional video equipment. And if that worked out, I'm not volunteering that it would, but if we determine that works fine, then we wouldn't really need the printout. We would be able to use the iPads as we normally would, and you know, broadcast, I guess, the council chambers, and then make sure that the audio is loud enough that the one camera would be able to pick it up. But you know, I'll talk to Bea and Heather about that, and whether we can put something together for Tuesday just to see if it works, you know. But give me a chance to use some of the high priced toys that I have and stuff. So anyways, I'll talk to Bea and Heather about that.
Okay. All right. So we do have a motion to look at meeting in person for our meeting next Tuesday. So any further discussion on that? All in favor? Okay, motion is carried, and so that we will look to staff to make that happen for us. With respect to the other council meeting, oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to ask, to your point with respect to the other meeting dates and the election and the fact that 4 of us will be running for re-election in some capacity. I'm just wondering what's been customary in the past as council goes into election mode.
And I would have to defer to Ms. Renton on that. I know we met. I don't remember if it was as regularly as we always had. So perhaps someone else would know better.
Right. Thank you, Worship. Typically, to the best of my recollection, you did meet as per regular. It gets a little choppy, though, come the middle of October. It is helpful to try and get through as much work as you possibly can, though, as I'm sure you'll understand, and particularly within these, you know, somewhat challenging pandemic circumstances where, you know, even again, the logistics of an in-person hybrid Zoom meeting is, you know, it can be time consuming and quite tiring at times for council, as you see, like 2 hours sort of cap out at a meeting with all of the behind the work scene work that has to be done to prepare for a meeting and actually participate in this new reality. consequently, if you can continue to meet the regular meetings as are set forth in the agenda until at least, getting through this 13th of October, that would be great. And then the election being on Saturday, the 17th, the main election day. Of course, there's advanced polling and election opportunity before them. Because typically those last 2 weeks of October, from what would be now the 19th through to the 30th, the 2 working weeks there, our council, the existing council is quite hesitant to meet and do any substantial business except for urgent matters. Then in the first week of November is typically the swearing in ceremony. Could go over until the 9th. Unfortunately, we don't have a new election calendar that specifies that, but in short, it's best to forge ahead, get as much work as you can get done up to and including the 13th of October, and then have a swearing in on the first week of November. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I would add that I think holding the meeting dates that are standard meeting dates of council is helpful, in our calendars as possible times, potential a need to meet right through to the end of October, just because there may not knowing. It could very well be that we wouldn't hold a meeting, but I guess I wouldn't want it to be felt that it was just crossed off and then filled in with something else in the interim. But less likely that there'd be anything. So I wouldn't think there'd be a lengthy meeting at any point in October after the 13th, but there may be a need to meet. Would be my advice. So with that being said, I guess we've had a discussion, we've had a meeting, or rather a motion about resuming some in-person meetings starting next week, and then otherwise the council agenda meeting schedule would look as it normally would. So with that being said, and looking at the time, it's just before 3. So I would suggest that we have our first recess right now, as there's a natural break, and we will resume the meeting at 3:10. Okay, it is 3:10. Most of us are back in view. Councillor Mosier, we'll wait, give him another few seconds. Hopefully he's not far. And we'll rejoin the meeting before we start any new business.
I'm here, but I'm just doing a few things, so I'm listening in.
Okay, so we will move on then. I would, I mean, exhausted
Pardon me?
things that are bolded.
Oh, there you go.
Would say that we can then go back to the sequence of the agenda items that are as the agenda has been prepared. So going back to 7A2, we have the proposed amendments to the Nova Scotia Heritage Property Act, and we had a staff report prepared by Mr. McDonald, our heritage manager, for us on that report. So Mr. McDonald is with us, and I know he addressed the proposed changes in the report. So are there highlights that you would like to make for us, Mr. McDonald, in discussion of that report?
Thank you, Your Worship. We received notice from Communities, Culture, and Heritage of 2 proposed amendments to the Heritage Property Act, and I'll deal with the first item. The first item is proposal to remove Section 18 of the Act, consideration by municipalities of applications to alter or demolish. This section allows a registered municipal heritage property owner to complete an alteration or demolition which may be contrary to the decision of a municipal council, provided that a 3-year waiting period has passed since the formal application was made. So they're considering removing that from the Heritage Property Act and requiring any substantial alteration or demolition to require council's approval. I outlined a report for council's consideration and drafting a letter back to Communities, Culture, and Heritage. I do have a couple issues which I outlined in the report. The first issue is the fact that they're kind of changing the rules on property owners in the middle of the process without their agreement. The same thing happened when originally it was known as the 1 year, not more than 2 year rule. They amended it to the 3 year, not more than 4 year rule. And a lot of people get upset that they actually changed the rules on those designated registered heritage properties without the owner's consent. Now they're considering removing that entirely. I'm also afraid that people may shy away from the possibility of registering their heritage properties, knowing that there's no cooling off period or waiting period allowed anymore, that if they wish to do a substantial alteration or demolition, that they require council's approval to do so. I proposed an alternative for the province to consider, which would allow municipalities to keep the 3, not more than 4 year rule as it applies, or opt for the consideration of requiring council's approval each time for a substantial alteration or demolition, which would be written within the owner's notice of registration that's filed at the land registration office. I think that's a much fairer alternative, because the property owner will know at the time they're registering their property what the rules are with regards to either applying for a substantial alteration or a demolition. So I outlined those in the report. The second proposed amendment to the Heritage Property Act is a new provision which proposes to provide authority to the municipality to put in place a pause for a period of time for specific types of developments, site-specific while a conservation plan and conservation bylaw documents are being prepared for a proposed heritage conservation district or cultural landscape. The municipality would be provided the authority to put the provision in place for up to 1 year. And staff feels that is a great idea and recommends that council approves or authorizes to the province that they're in agreement with the proposed second amendment to the Heritage Property Act. I did draft a letter for the mayor for information purposes, but the province is seeking our comments by September 30th. And I recommend that council approve a motion that provides council enables the mayor to draft comments to communities, culture, and heritage regarding the two amendments as outlined in their letter of June 16th, 2020. And I propose that for council's consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, for your input and your insight, your knowledge in this area. So there's some recommended thoughts for us to share with the province with respect to their changes to the Property Act, and certainly open for discussion on the report and the recommendation. So the recommendation would, if there's anyone who would want to move the recommendation, we could then share basically the sentiments that are expressed in the report to the province officially. So welcome a motion to that effect. And if there's not that, then we should discuss further as well. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship. It's makes sense to me. So it's at this point, we're just providing some additional input. So it's worth doing.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Croft seconds that. Any further discussion with respect to the, yes, Councillor Bachman.
Just for clarity on my part, this is for registered properties only. That's all. So I guess through to Mr. McDonald, that would be for registered properties only. So if my property is not registered, I don't have to worry about this part of the act.
Your worship, that is correct. It only applies to registered municipal heritage properties through the Heritage Property Act. It's not with regards to a district or heritage conservation district.
And these are municipally registered heritage properties. Yes, for further clarification. Good, thank you. Any further questions? Let's see, so I guess then we may be ready to vote on the motion. And Ms. Renton, the motion is clear, I presume, as it's
Yep,
based on
thank you very much, Your Worship. Yep.
Recommendation that's in the report. So all in favor? And no one is left to oppose. The motion is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, for looking into that for us. And we will be talking further about correspondence to the province in response. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the with respect to the South Shore Fieldhouse Society town grant application with the notation of the bit of money that is remaining in that in the balance of that account within our budget. So anyone like to comment or start the discussion on that request? Looking it up myself here. So it is from the field house. It is for the specific ask was for a piece of equipment that was deemed to be a revenue generator for the facility. to help them through this particularly difficult time. So I'm sure every recreation facility's struggled with the pandemic situation for sure. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Just a concern, Your Worship, they're asking for $3,500 from us, and, you know, we've got basically 10% of that. You know, if they don't raise enough money to buy it, you know, what happens then? You know, we're certainly not gonna, we don't have $3,500. And I'm sure that's just a pro rata amount for Lunenburg, and Bridgewater and the municipality would be, you know, higher amounts. Do we know if they've, what kind of response they've had from the other municipalities? At this point, probably not, but just a concern.
I don't know. But I do think that that was the full amount of the item. It in the funding sources summary, it shows all of the different components of that golf equipment, and the total is 3740.
Your Worship, on the application, the amount of funding requested is, maybe they're requesting the full amount. Maybe they're not asking other people. I don't know. Maybe they want us to buy this and the municipality of District Lunar buy something else. I don't know.
I noticed that the District of Chester had given them some funding from an earlier request, as that's listed in their financial statement, that there's some. Find that there was some a donation grants. MODC in May supported them with a grant of $2,500. Also on the screen is the anticipated Town of Lunenburg contribution, $35.82. Not sure why that wouldn't be the same as the sports fund. But anyway. So how would we do need to respond to the request in one way, shape, or form. So perhaps there could be, yes, oh, sorry, see a couple of hands now. Councillor Croft and Councillor Bachman. So in that order, please.
Thank you, Worship. The set of equipment looks interesting. I think if we were going to give $3,500, I think it should be equipment that we should buy for our own facility, and there certainly be a new good program for our center. So I don't think, in my mind, I'm in favor of giving any money for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bachman.
I'm going to echo Councillor Croft. I don't think one, the request was late past our normal deadline, and what we do have is nowhere near what they're looking for. So I think we deny the request.
Any further thoughts from other members of council? Yes, Councillor Risser.
I'll just move that we deny the request.
So moved, is there, and seconded by Councillor Mosier. Okay, I just, the one comment to the contrary that I would mention, which ultimately make a big deal of difference because we don't have very much left in our account anyway, but to the tune of supporting an organization by giving them the tools to better support themselves, I think was a good strategy to employ, and given different circumstances, the response might be somewhat different. But with the amount we have in the bank and not knowing what other resources they may have even to acquire that piece of equipment, I don't have anything further to add. So if there isn't anything further, there is a motion to deny on the floor. So all in favor? And there's no one to oppose, so the motion is carried, and we will respond as kindly as we were able to their request. So next item on the agenda is the Lunenburg Academy Exterior Restoration Information Update, and Mr. McDonald has a very comprehensive report for us in that regard. So perhaps he'd like to give us the highlights of that as well, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just a report for council's information. It's intended to provide an update as to the progress made with regards to the Lunenburg Academy exterior restoration project. I have attached the DSRA field review reports that has quite a bit of information, and you can see the progress made over the year. Also attached to the report is a report to Parks Canada in line with their funding agreement, as well as some additional photos. Overall, the project is progressing quite well. Staff undertook an assessment of the conditions with Schooner and DSRA, and have encountered more rot than anticipated, particularly with regards to the windowsills, transom sills, ornamental bands, as well as the brackets, dentils, and trims. The east elevation turned out to be the worst side of the academy. However, we did foresee this possibility, and there are sufficient funds built into the budget to address these components. We are currently on budget and within the proposed budget as submitted to council. I outlined just roughly a summary of the mansard roof and the towers, which are now pretty much completed. They're doing some flashing around the edges of the mansard roof, but that's pretty much now all completed. Outline issues with the dormers, windows, entrances, the wood brackets, and the exterior walls. The total budget was roughly $1.5 million. And we currently have a balance remaining of roughly 150,000. But that flashing detail that we spoke of, the total cost hasn't come in to us yet on that, but that will be an extra, which will come out of the 153 that you see there. So there's might be the flashing detail as well as some extras that come through, but the contractor and DSRA has advised us that we should be well within the budget, and propose during the council's meeting of September 24th, 2019, which I think is a very positive sign. So the intent of this memo is just to update council. No further action is required at this time.
Thank you very much from Mr. McDonald, and it's great to see the pictures. They're very informative. It was also amazing to be up on the staging and to see up close. It's all of the detailed work that's gone into restoring this beautiful building to its original luster. And it's looking great. And the anticipated completion date, Mr. McDonald, is that?
Yes, we're still looking at the end of September, so the end of this month.
That's great. Great news. Almost on time and on budget. It's music to our ears, I think. But are there any questions or comments further comment for Mr. McDonald? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I guess I can't remember. I thought we had allowed a fairly large contingency in this plan. You know, and when I think of a budget, I don't think of the budget actually including the contingency. So, you know, I mean, if the 1.5 million actually included the contingency, then obviously we've gone past what the original estimate was. And secondly, and I said this when this came up last time, when they came up with a a number of additions to the contract that these guys, more than anybody else, should realize that they're going to run into wood rot and things. When anybody that has an old house in Old Town would know that, you know, you start taking the siding off, you're going to find all kinds of things. So I'm a little disappointed that we're, you know, on budget. I would have expected us to be below budget. And so granted, we budgeted the money, but I think I seem to remember the contingency was much higher than what we normally allow for a construction project. So my comment.
Anything further? There isn't. Thank you very much for the report, Mr. McDonald, and we look forward to seeing the building with its staging removed and the big reveal. Hopefully will be impressive for everyone.
Thank you.
The next item in order on the agenda is the Cultural Action Plan and a discussion on that. We recall we had the formal presentation at our last meeting, and the lovely document that was prepared for us is within our agenda package again, and it is there for our review, further review and discussion. So the Lunenburg Foundation for the Arts was the leading organization who undertook this project. The town of Lunenburg was a supporting partner. I believe Deputy Mayor was on the steering committee. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
And yes, thank you. And so this is 15 specific goals were identified, and there was some suggested action, yes, in the conclusion of the report. So what are council's thoughts on how to deal with this report prepared for our benefit? Yes, sorry, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
There are some, you know, major recommendations in there which also represent major costs. I guess I can't really see us, you know, like approving. I think we can accept the document, accept receipt of the document, but I think then it's going to be a task for the new council to spend you know, considerable time on it, and you know, go through each item and see, you know, what's doable and what's you know, what's affordable, because I can think of two items in there. The one, the suggestion being that, you know, we work out something where the town would hire a consultant for 3 years, and you know, there's not something I think we would want to, you know, approve at this point of our term. And similar, there's a couple of other suggestions in there too that would mean significant fundraising potentially. So I think all we can really do now is just sort of, you know, accept the document and, you know, pass it on to the next council as something that they should spend time on within the first very short while of their mandate. So.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the plan? I think, for example, the strategic directions, there were 5 identified, and they certainly, I would think, are quite agreeable. They sort of suit the type of community we are. They reference, you know, they're very similar to our own long in place strategic plan with regards to prominence and importance of the cultural creative economy and the cultural sector to the community. But there are, you know, very specific goals identified as well, and recommendations on what to do about that. So I take I understand the deputy mayor's reluctance to adopt wholeheartedly. Yes. Deputy Mayor, go ahead again.
You worship, yeah, I put my hand up just as you were saying wholeheartedly. But, perhaps we could approve and, the 5 strategic directions, because as you say, they're all, the right things to do. It's just some of the specifics, would be hard to approve for us right now.
Right. Yes, Councillor Visser.
Thank you, Worship. Just on a point of clarification, I seem to recall that this was a report for the sector less than the town, and that it would be some sort of sectoral partnership that would be steering this moving forward. And of course, the town would be I presume, a supporter and a participator in some fashion in that. But I'm just wondering, it probably wouldn't even be for us to approve, would it? The only thing we'd be approving is how engaged we as a corporate body would want to be in the moving forward of this process.
So I see what you're saying, and Deputy Mayor, you wanted to speak to that?
No,
specifically?
I think he's right, and and what I'm referring to is that a lot of the strategic actions, the suggestion is that the town would. So yeah, I'm not referring to, we would not approve things that they're asking perhaps the Board of Trade to do, for instance, but there are a number of things where they specifically think that should be a town function, and I think we need to spend some time evaluating that.
So that's clear. I find it's helpful that they conclude the report with a question of where to begin, which is what we're kind of looking at. We're struggling with, I think, in this discussion about what do we do, and that is with their final goal, which is to work together. They specifically say sectorial representatives, Town of Lunenburg and Board of Trade. But I guess it's whether or not we're a willing participant in a collaborative effort, and perhaps our approach to what happens with this report can be an indication of that. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. I just noticed that Sheila's on the line and she has her hand raised, so if somebody could grant her speaking rights if it would be appropriate. I think she has something she wants to say.
Well, I think that is the will of council as a whole. So this is the part of the council discussion that is for council discussion following a presentation. But if council would like to hear from Ms. Woodcock, I'm sure she's expressed an interest in offering us some input.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Risser, for noticing the hand raise. I also should note that also online and available is Rebecca Can, the consultant who did the presentation at the last meeting. But I just wanted to clarify 2 things. One is that the request in the presentation was to approve the report in principle, and it is being presented to the town. It was originally at the outset designed as a report for the town. And so therefore, the recommendation or the request was that council approve it in principle. And then, as Ms. McCullum is showing there, and work with the Cultural Roundtable, which is the new name for what was the steering committee, to work with the next steps, to investigate resources, to support implementation, and identify other partners. The funding reference that Councillor McGee, the Deputy Mayor, referenced was not to hire a consultant, but rather to apply for a grant to hire a staff person to be located somewhere to facilitate implementation of many of the recommendations. So I don't know if that helps the discussion or clarifies anything.
thank you, Ms. Woodcock. I think it does. It was helpful to have that refocus on what the actual request of the report of council was to be. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. In the interest of moving the train along, I'll move that we accept the report and get a staff report for what our participation would take or entail in terms of resourcing, and refer this to the next council.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? And we may look to Ms. Renton for, seconded by Councillor Croft. And Ms. Renton, or were you able to capture that?
Some of that. I think that it said that we approve the report, or was it more likely to receive the report?
Receive.
The report and get a staff report on what the expectations of the town are in regards to that. Is that right?
Basically, how would we resource participation and what would it take?
Okay. Thank you.
For an incoming council. So this is a report you're not anticipating. Am I reading you correctly, Councillor Risser?
Yeah, entirely, Your Worship, but it's open to amendment by
Yeah,
other
no.
councillors. I wouldn't envision us having the time to do much on this before the incoming council at any rate.
Great. Thank you. So any further discussion on this then? There isn't. Are you ready for the question? So all in favor? Okay, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much. And we will move this report along, and also, yeah, make note too that with our comprehensive community plan still in the works, and I know that the bodies, that there was close collaboration with the consultants working on that report. So it's perhaps helpful to have, when that report will be cross-referenced with the priorities that are recommended from specifically the cultural sector. So very good. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, we're into 7B, and that's under the fire department. And there is a fire department request for additional pumper tanker expenditures from the current sales proceeds of the surplus trucks, looking at additional costs of $2,794. So yes, Councillor Croft. I think you are still muted, Councillor Croft.
I would move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I always press the one that's on my picture, and it's the one down at the bottom of the screen. So gotcha. And Councillor Mosers indicating seconding the approval for that. Is there any further discussion or questions with respect? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, I know some of this has been done in the past, but like both District 1 and 2 and ourselves are looking at, reserving significant dollars for, I think for District 1 and 2, they're talking like $200,000 a year that they have to plan on spending for the next truck. And this $80,000, shouldn't that just be held in a reserve as opposed to being available for, additional things, turnout gear or whatever, or even returned back to the entities that bought the new truck? I mean, will it just sit there now as a resource for additional equipment? What's the policy? What's the plan with that?
Thank you, Ms.
Did
Dagley.
the same thing as Councillor Croft. So yes, to most of what the Deputy Mayor said, The proceeds come into the town with the sale, and 50% of that, if the trucks that had been purchased before with the district, if there was 50-50 sharing on those, 50% of that goes back to the district. It is held in our truck reserve. These expenditures, unfortunately, are overages in the truck that we just bought. So that's where the dilemma lies. But yes, they will be saved for future trucks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further questions that are points of clarification? We have a motion to approve the request. So all in favor? Any opposed? No. And the motion is carried. Thank you. That money will be so used. And we can then move on to the Public Works Department. There's a May to July water utility and wastewater treatment results and general information. The staff reports prepared for us with respect to quality reports for the past months, May, June, July. And the numbers are there for our information. Any questions? Mr. Tillard is with us. Yes, Councillor Bachman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Tillard, I guess. It says that a couple of the tests didn't go as planned, and most were relating back to the not cleaning enough of the UV bulbs. Is this something that we can find a way to improve? Or was this more or less a vacation thing because of shortage of manpower? Or it seems to have happened several times. So just wondering if we know this is a problem, is there a way we can fix it?
Yes, Your Worship. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes, there's I guess there's two parts to that, and one is as we're progressing through sort of the analysis of where the plant operations are, we're seeing more and more of specific items such as this, identifying them clearly, the sort of the cause and effect. And yes, in terms of cleaning, that's certainly part of the plan going forward to improve that procedure.
Thank you. Good to know. Any other questions? These reports are provided for our information, ongoing updates. If there aren't any further questions, we will move on to the next item on our agenda. And that is a discussion that was...
Sorry, Your Worship, Councillor Croft had his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Councillor Croft, you go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to recommend that at some point before the meeting ends that we discuss the arena ice surface reopening before the meeting is over. If we could, please.
Sure, I know that's an item that's of particular interest to us all. So we're getting...
It is on the agenda, Your Worship.
Yep, we are getting short on time. So if we need to move ahead to that, we can, just looking at, there's quite a few things ahead, not a lot that require, but you never know. So perhaps we can finish with this public works section of this, and then before we move into A, we can move over to that item on the agenda, which is under 9B. So the LGBTQ plus crosswalk painting initiative discussion, I think that was placed on the agenda as an item for discussion, having seen what was done in other neighboring communities, and the thought that it might be a lovely project to pursue at some point. So is there specific asks or request to come for the meeting?
And councillors had asked to add this to the agenda, your worship, for discussion.
So is there, yes, Councillor Mosier and then Councillor Bachman?
Well, I think so. We're also looking at maybe some suggestions from staff of where we might locate this particular sidewalk. We want to do something like this. That would be very helpful.
I don't think there was a specific ask at this point because we hadn't had the discussion. It was, but that's a potential request of staff, as would be the timing and lots of other things. Yeah, so Councillor Bachman and then Councillor Risser.
My comment was just going to be, I think it's a great idea, but in the respect for time, and discussion could take a while on this one, so I would look to defer.
Okay, Councillor Risser.
I was just going to move to get a staff report then.
All right, I'll second. On second staff report for location and where would be the best location and where would the timing for to have the install done?
Timing, financing, yeah, all the rest of it.
Timing, financing of doing this particular project. Crosswalk specifically. Any then discussion on that motion? Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I do remember the last time we had this discussion, and I thought it was a good idea, and I might be able to incorporate it into the paper that the staff brings back to us, that council would do the painting. I think that we have the right amount of people for the colors. Just kind of works out nice.
That would be that.
Little community project for the councilors to do.
Okay. So council participation in painting of a crosswalk in town would be an option. How that might happen in the staff report to be provided. Any further comments on the motion? Okay, all in favor? No one to oppose, so that motion is carried, and we look forward to a staff report on that idea. Paula Baker requests to remove a town tree at 26 Linden Avenue at her expense and replant another tree for a new driveway. I guess not replanting the tree for the driveway, but removing the tree for a driveway and replanting a tree in that order. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, I really don't see any reason for us to, I guess, disagree with Mr. Tiller's measured response back to her as to why the tree should not be removed. So I don't know we need to do anything with this. She's been told the reasons why it shouldn't be removed, and they make sense to me. So
Any further thoughts on that? Guess that's, again, right, that is the policy that staff are following, and then citizens have the privilege, I guess, of taking it to another level to see if there's any flexibility in that response. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I think we are burning up a lot of time here, so I'd be happy to defer that and then get into the arena.
Okay, yes, Councillor Bachman.
I was going to say, I don't know if we need to defer. My opinion is the same as the deputy mayor. It'd be a request denied. Just give her a second letter saying council denies the request for me.
I certainly would welcome further discussion on it unless the other members of council are of the similar mind that's already been expressed. So there's been yes, Councillor Croft.
Your worship, I'll agree with the deputy mayor and Councillor Bachman with that, and just write him a letter, and we've denied the request.
So you would move that then, perhaps, Councillor Croft, to move this along. Is moved by Councillor Croft, seconded by Councillor Bachman to deny the request. Any further discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? There are 2 opposed, but the motion is carried by majority vote. So
Those voting in opposition, your worship, are yourself.
are myself and Councillor Mosier.
Thank you.
So then we will move then as suggested or as requested to the 9B under recreation, the Lunenburg War Memorial Arena ice surface reopening and comparative arena information. And there was a staff report prepared for us around that information. And I believe Ms. Cunningham is with us and can speak to that further.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the Lunenburg War Memorial Arena will have a delayed opening this ice season due to the provincial government pandemic restrictions. We are hopeful that the arena will reopen at the earliest possible opportunity in compliance with the updated or with any updated provincial directives. So as you can see in my information report, the first section is the Hockey Nova Scotia Rebound Play, and their current hockey structure is noted in the bullet points. These are subject to change depending on public health guidelines. So the current hockey structure is that you can have groups of 50 with social distancing or physical distancing, or you can have groups of 10 without physical distancing. There's also the option of have multiple groups of 10 as long as they do not interact with each other and they stay as a bubble. Moving on to the Recreation Facility Association of Nova Scotia, so that's now referred to as RFANS. So a letter of concern was sent to the provincial government on behalf of all arenas in Nova Scotia on August 24th, 2020. The letter addressed how the current public health restrictions is one of the biggest obstacles that arenas are facing for the upcoming arena season with anticipated loss of revenue. The letter states that RFANS is strongly recommending that these limits be reconsidered and to increase to 50 as soon as possible. In Appendix A, the letter can be found from RFANS, which I will just reference a few points, which I think that are important to say. So in the RFANS letter, they said dealing with COVID-19 has already put economic pressure on recreation and sport facility operators. The added cost to implement safety precautions, sanitization, new equipment, additional staff, and public health directives have taken a toll. On the second page, with gathering limits to 10 or less without social distancing, arenas expect to experience a drastic reduction in participation in adult recreation, which means additional revenue loss. Further, it says the expected minor sport rentals to be reduced, once again adding to the revenue lost. Antigonish Arena is a great example where I have heard now that the Minor Hockey Association of Antigonish is waiting for guidelines to change before they start running their minor hockey. And one last point I'd like to make from their letter is that it says arena revenue from arena not only is impacting recreation and sport facilities, but the community directly as well, such as hotels, restaurant, gas stations, local shopping, etc. So that letter was sent to Premier McNeil and Dr. Strang. Moving back to my report, and of course, I lost my other sheet. Oh, there it is. Sorry about that. So with South Shore Minor Hockey, I'm continuously in communication with them, and they are optimistic that the provincial restrictions will be eased and that they'll be able to re-examine increasing their projected reduced rental rates at the arena based on provincial guidelines that may change. I spoke to the general manager of the BMO Center, which is in Bedford, and the RBC Center in Dartmouth, who is also the South Shore representative of RFANS and has been a fantastic resource over the past several years. So I asked him about a plan that I was told about for the Adult Hockey League in the arenas that he manages. So this plan has stated that each team is allowed 14 skaters plus a goalie in dressing rooms during play. So this would not comply with the current public health regulations set out by the province. The general manager has clarified that this format cannot happen until the provincial public health gatherings number increases. This league has a pending start date after Thanksgiving. However, this is forward planning in hopes that the current public health restrictions are lifted. Some information that is currently not in my report that from today is that I spoke to several additional arenas today, arena managers and recreation directors along Nova Scotia. The Antigonish Arena will be having a delayed opening. Their manager also said that most arenas in the Highland zone is having a delayed opening. Oxford Arena is not opening this season. Middleton and District Arena is undetermined if they will be opening this season due to provincial guidelines, but they are hoping to open, but is undetermined. Bridgetown and District Memorial Arena is in a similar situation as Middleton, where they are not sure if they can open at all. This report is for council's information further to the decision made to delay the ice season reopening. I am continuously staying in contact with our municipal and provincial representatives and will continue to do so and to share updates with both council and arena long-term users as they become available. With this information report, I did put a recommendation that council send a letter of report to the provincial government in support of the RFAN's position to increase the provincial gathering number to allow for arena rentals this upcoming season. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cunningham, for that report. Are there questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor Visser.
Thank you, and thank you, Kelly, for that extensive report. Just one quick question. Do we have any sense of what would be required from public health to increase the gathering limits safely? In terms of what circumstances must change provincially at the provincial level?
Sure. So I haven't heard of anything in particular. I've heard of a few dates of when a gathering number may increase. Everything's kind of hearsay. People are hoping that it could be the end of September. I know that Hockey Nova Scotia has a meeting at the end of end of September. So we're hoping that maybe that meeting may start to spark a little bit of change, but as of right now, there's nothing further.
And if such gathering limits were to put us in a position to open the arena, how long would it take to ramp up, as it were?
Sure. So to make the ice, we need to get the floor scrub, start the compressor, and then begin our process. So I would say about 2 to 3 weeks to have the ice down and to get all the proper cleaning and everything in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Kelly. Have you talked to anybody at the LCLC to see what their plans are?
So the LCLC is in a very similar position as us. They are doing the 10-person maximum guidelines. And I'm just looking at my notes because I've talked to so many people that I don't want to get my information incorrect. All right, so when I spoke with the LCLC, they said that their change rooms are a maximum of 10 people. You are only allowed 10 people maximum, or 2 groups of 10, which you would need a divider in between the ice, and you're not allowed to go back and forth on either side of the ice. You have to stay in your cohort. When I spoke with them at the time, they said their adult hockey is a maximum 10, and you can't overlap. They talked about you need to be in a bubble, or you can have the 2 groups of half of the ice. And at that time, they said that many users won't use their dressing room, so that wouldn't be as much of a factor to ensure that the cleaning and sanitization between rentals. So it all depends on who's doing the rental.
So they are opening, but they are opening under the same restrictions that any other ice surface is running with right now, which is a maximum of 10, as had been stated, and with all the other restrictions similar to what Queen's Place had, that information that was shared with us earlier. Councillor Croft, you had further questions? Sorry.
I did. I'm just curious what message has been sent out to the public around our possible reopening then. Is there some statement that we've made or wording that we've sent out on that?
So the very beginning of my my report, I referenced what was said to the public about there will be a delayed opening this ice season due to provincial government pandemic restrictions. We remain hopeful that the arena will reopen at the earliest possible opportunity in compliance with updated provincial directives. So that was the message that was sent out to the public. And also, we did notice or notify that we have purchased a new ice resurfacer, which will come later in 2021 once it's delivered.
Councillor Bachman.
Thanks, Your Worship. I happened to be in the Valley over the weekend and spoke to somebody from Canning, and they're also having a delayed opening. They're not going to open until at least November the 1st. And then it's hopeful for them as well. So they're still waiting on guidelines or what may or may not change. But I think at the very least that we could pass the recommendation that council send a letter of support for the provincial government, as Kelly suggested, that might help us to achieve the restrictions being lessened a little bit, that might allow us to open at a later date, of course.
Would you like to move that recommendation, Councillor Bachman?
Yes, I would.
Okay, moved and seconded by Councillor Croft that we, as was recommended, send a letter of support for the RFAN's position as set forth in their letter to the province, to support all that they said. Ditto that. I would suggest too that as Ms. Cunningham is staying very much on top of what is happening, but it's as we had originally determined, there doesn't seem like there would be much uptake for ice time given the restrictions that are currently in place. And although some of the larger facilities are open, they are open with those restrictions enforced at this point in time. And the appetite for that may also change. You know, we had come to that conclusion given that most of our regular renters didn't feel they would be prepared to rent the ice time. So I think in addition to being in communication with the or being aware of what the restrictions are for public health guidelines and what is happening in other facilities around the province, also we should keep our ear to the ground, so to speak, as to what our population may want to do as far as renting facilities given the guidelines, because they could change, they may not change, but the appetite for making use of the facility at a reduced capacity may change, and or they may change, but not to the degree that everyone is hopeful they do. So I think we need to be vigilant on all of those fronts, as we've heard from certain portion of the community, at least, that this facility will be greatly missed if it's forced to stay closed for an extended period. But I also point out that it's not unusual for the Lunenburg Arena not to open in October. It's happened before. It's a newer development that it opens as early as we have of late in October. It's often been after Thanksgiving. So, you know, it's at this point, at this stage, it's may not be as great a hardship. And as was pointed out in the report earlier, the colder the weather, the easier it is to make good ice. And so that could work in our favor as well. So anyway, the motion is to write a letter of support. And I'm just sort of adding the thought that we may want to revisit this at some point in the time in the not too distant future, so that we're all up to speed on you know, what's been changing in the landscape. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I would suggest we keep this ongoing on the agenda, that we keep updated on it, and we'll be able to also be able to convey what we know back to the public.
So I think that if that could be then kept on our agenda, that would be very helpful for future reference. And are we ready then for a vote on the motion for a letter? All in favor? No one to oppose. The motion's carried unanimously, and we will pen that letter and get it off as soon as possible. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Risser and Councillor Croft both had hands raised.
Yeah, Your Worship, I was just wondering if before we sign off, and I don't know when that will be, we should probably rise and report the in-camera items that have been on our agenda for a couple meetings now, because I'm sure some of the tenants are patiently awaiting answers.
Okay, and I've lost I buried my agenda, so sorry for that. Okay, so rather than moving back to where we'd left off, it's suggested that we continue down the list from where we are now to 10. Item 10 on our agenda, consideration of council in-camera meeting August 25th, 2020 recommendations and notices of motion, and there are 2 listed there. So I'd look to members of council to move ahead to formally make the recommendations, or recommendation in time period. Yes, Councillor Croft.
I was going to ask Your Worship, going back to the recreation, if it would be appropriate to ask at this meeting what our staffing is doing now in preparation for a possible opening, or would that be better asked at a different meeting?
I think perhaps that's something we should take, follow up with to find out for sure what you're asking. I think it might be better to ask it at another meeting or just offline for now. So with the in camera, and we are after 4, so I'm looking for the indulgence of council to move, as Councillor Risser suggested, to discuss to bring forward the recommendations from our in-camera meeting of August 25th. Thought it was before that, but it was.
Yeah, actually the 18th, Your Worship.
Sorry.
My error. Yeah, the 18th.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was our last public meeting.
Yeah, it was
So,
deferred
yes.
from then.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
If I can move both the recommendations, I would.
Okay.
I think we might want to do that separately, because I suspect Councillor Moser will vote for one and against another.
Then I'll move the first recommendation then.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Yes, Councillor Bachman, thank you. Any discussion further on the recommendation? Calling for the question then. All in favor of denying Travel Lunenburg the request to end the lease? Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to do that again. Sorry, I'm looking down. All in favor? Okay. Motion is carried. And then the second recommendation, Deputy Mayor would move that as well.
Sure, I'll move
Sure.
that. I'll move the second recommendation.
Okay, is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Bachman, thank you. To offer a 25% landlord rent reduction program to Lunenburg Academy for profit businesses, subject to program application criteria similar to the town's COVID-19 property tax relief program. Any further discussion, or anyone wish to discuss that item further?
The seconder, Your Worship, was.
Councillor Bachman.
Thank you.
All in favor then? And opposed? Okay, the motion is carried with Councillor Moser and Councillor Croft voting in the negative. So It is 4:15. We do still have a significant number of items left to defer if council wishes to adjourn as per schedule. But I think we had bolded what we hoped to get through. We got through some more items, but yes, Councillor Risser.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Croft. And that's not debatable, so I will take the vote with a note that as I said, there's quite a few items still left on the agenda that will be deferred, and we have fewer meetings to which to defer them. But all in favor? And meeting is adjourned and we'll defer them. Thank you very much for your time.